Welcome to Inner Voice of Knowing podcast. I'm Kaye, a shamanic leadership coach and healer, guiding you through life with a foot in both worlds. When you understand the terrain of the inner landscapes, the mental, emotional, spiritual, and energetic, you will become the leader within your physical life, both personally and professionally. After all, the power of change is in your hands. Let's get this journey started. Welcome everyone back to Inner Voice of Knowing. I'm really excited to introduce this next guest. We do not know each other very well, but there's a deep sense of familiarity. So Miriam Villegas, did I pronounce that correctly? I like to.
Yes,
your business is Magnetic Mindset, and you are a success and mindset coach, and you studied at the Bob Proctor Institute.
Yes.
Yeah. And I've recently had the pleasure of being on your Abundance Summit. So you are all about mindset and everything. But when we were chatting and getting to know each other, when you were deciding whether I was a fit for what you were doing, there was just a really beautiful story. So if you could share how this path started for you, like what got you into being a success and mindset coach and traveling this pathway.
Yeah, Kaye, I'm super excited, first of all, to be here today and to do this with you, because whenever we met, I felt this instant connection, right? Yeah. So let me tell our listeners how I started. It was in 2016 that I got into the mindset work. So I stumbled across the book, The Secret, found Bob Proctor, was fascinated. And first I did not believe it. I'm like, it can't be that everybody can attract abundance. If anybody could do that, we would all be rich and good looking and super in love.
I love that you say that, because you're the first person I've heard, Miriam, that goes, I picked up this book and I read it and I just did not believe it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that's so natural for someone who's just been, first introduction. Because by the very nature, the mind is going to go, what the? That can't be true. Yes, I love that honesty about that response.
Yeah. And it was really funny because at the same time, I was doubting, but I was also curious. And then I'm like, I can't believe that there are so many people in this book. They're saying it is true. So what if I would just try it out? Make it a game.
Yeah, love that.
And the fun part, Kaye, it worked. And do you know why it worked? Because it was a game. I was detached from the outcome.
Yeah, the child that plays, and because you've got a young one and I've got grandchildren now and have had young ones, the connection between the inner and the outer world are united at a young age. So they believe in the fantasy of the game of what they're doing because it's just fun.
Exactly. And when it's fun, then you're in the flow. But I did not know that when I tried it out. And I was like, okay, well, I was in my mid-30s. I was not married. I've traveled the world. I've been everywhere. And I just did whatever I wanted, no responsibilities. And then I got to a point where I wanted a family. I wanted to be married. I wanted to live in a country where it's warm, not in Germany anymore. And the book said, and everybody in there were saying, you just need to know exactly what you want.
Yep.
And visualize it. And you can make a vision board and pictures. And this is what I did. I was like, okay, I want to be married. And my husband needs to look like that. And I want him to live in a warm country so that I can live there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then they said, and then you just act like you would have it already. Okay. So I parked my car only on one side in the garage. I went to bed. I only slept on one side of the bed.
Yeah.
I served food. I served 2 plates. And in the beginning, I was like, this is so stupid. If anybody sees me, they think I'm crazy, right?
I got one of my clients who's now one of my closest friends to do that years ago, and she got her friends involved. So she would have a dinner party or a barbecue or a gathering, and they would always sit and they'd pretend to have conversations with him.
And
So
did it work?
I completely are in aligned with what you're saying about, like sleeping on one side of the bed, parking in one side of the garage and putting out a plate. That is just normal dialogue for me.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yep. What I also did is I cut out a picture from a magazine from a handsome gentleman that I saw
Mhm.
there. And guess what? It took me 3 months.
Yeah.
And then I met someone that looked almost exactly like the person that I had cut out. And I'm like, this can't be true. I was so shocked. And then we started talking, and he was from Texas, warm country.
Yes. Yeah.
And he said, why are you not coming to visit? And my birthday trip was coming up. I didn't have a flight booked yet.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, yeah, I wanted to visit my friends in Florida anyway. So let's just make a stop more in Texas.
Sure.
And then I got to Texas, and 3 days later I was married. And I never
Wow.
left.
Wow. Did you cover off, aside from looks and country or warmth, and did you cover off on the actual internal qualities of who he was to
Not
be?
so much. Not so much. And
Yeah.
so here's the thing, right?
Yeah.
I know this now, but I did not know this 7 years ago.
Yeah.
So we had a really rough time in the beginning to get to know each other, because I was so focused on the physical portion
Mm-hmm.
that I did not worry, because I didn't think it would work,
Yeah.
you know?
You were just playing a
And
game.
I was playing a game, yeah, and he was a super gentleman. And I'm not saying that, I mean, obviously it worked out, right? But what was really interesting was to see the expectations that we had, how a family structure would look like. And those things filtered out a year later, 1.5 years later, when our little one was born. And then he had so completely different expectations to family than I had.
Yeah.
But also, and this is basically the big story to why I'm doing what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever my little one was born, we got thrown into a very special situation, a very unique situation, because she came with only 5 months and 3 weeks.
Wow. That's young.
That's very young. Yeah. So we had this little teeny tiny bundle with 680 grams, 1 pound and 8 ounces. And the doctors, they were very direct. No, they said that most babies born so early, they are handicapped, and they just want us to be prepared. They cannot tell us what she's going to have, if it's going to be a developmental issue, developmental delay, or if she's going to have, some kids have cerebral palsy.
Yeah.
She might not be able to walk correctly. She might not be able to talk. They couldn't tell us, but they were very sure that she's going to have something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I suppose they, from their perspective, they need to do that. But how did that impact you? Was that a fear tunnel that you went down, or what happened for you?
Oh, my world fell apart, right? Not only did she came early, so now they also told me, okay, I'm going to be a handicapped mom. And I was sitting there and I'm like, this is not what I signed up for.
Yeah.
This is not what I wanted. My mom, she actually was a teacher for highly handicapped people. So I was growing up in that scenario. I knew how it would look like.
Yeah.
And I did not want this for me, but we spent a very long time in the hospital. So on month 4, they gave her a wrong medicine because they thought she had thrush, which she did not have. So they tried out different medicines, didn't work. And then we said, well, maybe she does not have it. But the doctors didn't know what else to do. So they said, we need to try out one more. And my gut feeling told me not to do so. And I wish I would have listened.
Yeah.
But I was emotionally so broken down then we said, okay, let's give it a try. And that medicine had burned her mouth and esophagus. And then we had to go for a feeding tube. So here I was.
Miriam. Oh, gosh.
And now I was a special needs mom, right?
Yeah.
Earlier than I thought.
Yeah.
And then your human comes out, because no matter how much mindset work you do, you're still in this human body. You're still reacting as a human. And then I just cried my ass out. I didn't know what to do anymore.
Yeah.
You know? But at some point, I just remembered the teachings of Bob and the secret, and that it had worked then, and it had worked for so many other things, right?
Sorry to stop you there, but so you're in the throes of a mother's almost worst nightmare, right? And then you know what that entails because you've grown up in that with the work that your mother does. So that sort of feeds into the fear even more. And then you find yourself there. The words from Bob Proctor and the others that were in The Secret, what did it just start resonating in your mind, like things out of the book? Was it how did you experience that penetrating through all that fear and overwhelm?
Mm-hmm. Well, I knew that my thoughts are creating my future. And what I'm experiencing right now might just be a challenge, because I need to learn something on the way to growth.
Yeah.
So I did not think, well, I had the thought in the first moment, I'm like, why me? What did I do to deserve that? Because like I said, I'm just human, right?
Yeah.
But
that's the natural reaction. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But very quickly, I was able to change that why me to okay, what do I need to learn? What's that situation, you know?
Yeah.
So I remembered, okay, this situation has been created either by my past thoughts or because I have to learn something. Let's assume I have to learn something. Now my thoughts from today are creating my future. Bob always said, do not let your outside circumstances tell you where you go. You have to live from the inside out.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like you flip a switch, you know?
It's a choice.
And from that moment, it's a choice, exactly. Yeah. And from that moment on, I was like, they can tell me whatever they want to tell me. Mm-hmm. Doctors can tell me all day, I will be a special needs mom. I will show them I am not. And Bob always said, you need to make a decision. And I was sitting there and I'm like, my decision is, I will not be a special needs mom. My baby is normal. And from that moment on, everything had changed. But it took me a while, Kaye.
Yes. Yeah, so the more that you said that, did you start to feel that at that cellular level, where it's not just a power statement, you're saying it permeates over time and becomes an absolute knowing?
Yes. From that moment on, I was operating from a state of knowing.
Yeah.
And then your whole energy changes.
Yes.
And you feel that, and your whole, also the baby itself, you know, she was always sad, and I don't know, it was such a weird situation. But the moment that I really said, my baby is normal. She's going to be normal developmentally. She's going to a normal school. No matter what it is, I will overcome this. I'm going to get rid of this feeding tube. I will show her how to eat with those therapists. And believe me, I hired a lot. I hired every therapist that I could find.
Yeah.
And then we were working with her. But how I was treating her was different. So the first month when she was home, my whole life was circulating around her feeding schedule. The feeding was 1 hour long. She needed to eat every 3 hours. So I had a 2-hour window. She was on this feeding pump where the feeding bag was connected. It was on a pole. It was a whole, you know, a whole setup.
Yeah.
And then I was sitting there the first month and I'm like, how can I ever have a normal life again? I mean, it's not doable. I have this whole setup here. I cannot just grab her like any other baby and go. And once I made this decision, I'm having a normal baby, then I said,
oh, that's okay. She's unwell in the background. That's the little cough from her. That's okay. She's being very good.
And once I made the decision she's normal, then I'm like, let's be creative. She has nothing, no developmental issue. This is what I decided. This is what's going to be, right?
Yeah.
So let me just take her out. Let me take her to the park. And then I was sitting there, okay, how am I going to handle this? How do I do this? And I started to research, and I found other information from other feeding tube moms, what they did. Yeah. So I got some hooks, and I hooked up the feeding bag on the back of the passenger seat, was feeding her while we were driving somewhere. Then I hooked up the feeding bag on the stroller while I was going with her through the park. So I did not limit my life anymore by this feeding schedule. I'm like, she needs to do it, fine. I just feed her wherever I am.
I love that. Every step of the way, what I'm hearing you say, Miriam, is you asked what I call the power question. Do you know what I mean? And then it's like the solutions come, the ideas come, and you're living a life that many would say this is confining and defining me. And you're like, no, it's not going to define me or my child or confine me or my child. You know, but that spark also comes from that each power question. How do I get this done? How do I do this? Yeah. Yeah.
And it was like an energy inside of me. And then I remembered what I did in the first place when it was a game, right? And all the other things that I had manifested and attracted in my life. And I'm like, I just knew it's going to happen. I don't know when, because the timeline is not up to me. The timeline is up to the universe. But I know it's going to happen. And this is what we even went to Germany with her in the plane. And I remember when we went through security, the TSA check, you know, when they check your body. And he didn't know what it was. And I said, she has a feeding tube. And he looked at me like, what? And then he pulled up her pullover or her sweater, whatever she had on, and saw it. And he was so embarrassed. And I remember. But obviously we made it through TSA then, right?
Yes, But wow. And getting her into the car, the stroller in the park, on an aeroplane. Ladies, anyone listening to this, you cannot be defined by the things that challenge you. Find a way.
And I want to add something. Do not let other people's looks judge you, because I had to deal with this a lot.
Yeah. While
I was feeding her through the tubie, so while she was getting her feeding through the tube, I was always telling her, oh, Amaya, you're eating so amazing. Every day you're eating more food. Every day you're accepting more food. Every day you're more hungry. And people were looking at me like, what is she doing? Because they did not know what I was doing. But I knew exactly that her subconscious mind is wide open.
Yeah.
As a baby. Whatever I tell her, she will believe it. And while I was basically reprogramming her, I was reprogramming myself as well to believe it, because the more often I said it, the more I created that belief.
It was a loop from you to your daughter back to you. Yeah.
Exactly. And her whole behavior changed. She was such a happy baby, you know. And this is how it went. And it took a while. So it took me 4 years. No, let me back up. It took actually a whole year. I got her to drink a sip, and it was with coffee creamer. French vanilla coffee creamer.
That must be a happy dance moment, you know, something so that everyone takes for granted was an absolute joyous moment for you, I'm sure.
It was. It was. And until today, she really, in the morning, she wants her French vanilla coffee creamer.
Yeah, that's her champion memory, her champion moment.
Right.
What was happening for your husband during all of that? Was he on board with you? What was that?
Very difficult.
Yeah.
It was very difficult. So while I was with her fighting for all this, right, he had a very hard time to cope.
Yeah.
And the 6 months, so we spent 6 months total in the NICU. And a lot of times I was alone, and I could not understand why there was no more support. And it was a rough journey since then. So obviously the hospital, they have support groups, you can talk to counselors, therapists, and they explained me that men in general cope different like women. So when something is not how we wish it goes, then women, they stand up and they fight to get what they want. A man, when they don't feel that they cannot control the situation anymore, they disappear.
Yeah, they don't know what to do.
And then they just stay.
And we're not talking about all men. This is just a generalized, what takes place. So, you know, by your very nature, Miriam, I'd say what I would call is the true initiate. So you've taken something that you read and you've gone, I don't know about this, but it's a trait that I have as well. It's like, well, you know what? I won't know whether this is true unless I apply it, right? And then I'll figure it out from there through the application and the experience of it. Then you get hit with this massive challenge, and then also the husband that emotionally sort of exits, and you just stayed true to feeding yourself, feeding your child, stake in the ground. I know this works. I'm not going to let doubt come in and you know, rob me of this. And you just stayed the course.
And you know why? I asked myself that too. But during the process, I told myself, okay, I have two choices here. I can either give up, and then most likely what the doctor is going to tell me will happen.
Yes.
Or I can just ignore everything and everybody that's around me and just do my thing and reprogram her mind and my mind in a way that it's beneficial for her. I do not have another choice. This is what I told myself all the time. I don't have another choice. This needs to work. It has worked in the past and it will work this time. And I just need to push myself because it took me such a long time. It took 4 years, Kaye, until I got the feeding tube out. 4 years. And it was a very long road and a lot of tears. And sometimes I thought I can't handle it anymore.
Yes, but you kept coming. What do you feel, Miriam? And first I want to acknowledge you, because a lot of people will go, I'm going to make this happen, and then they put their own time frame on it, rather than I'm going to make this happen and stay the course, and then the universe will design the right timing for it. So there's that, I can control what I can control, but the rest I'm going to let go of, but stay in that knowing. That's an incredibly powerful process to do, and to actually live and keep bringing yourself and calling yourself back to it. Where do you feel that strength came from? Do you know, is it just purely you and your mind, or are you being guided by the inner voice of knowing, power and potential? What's your take on that? What's your experience of that?
Yeah, I think the way I experience this is there was this knowing. And there was the voice that told me, just trust, do not give up, have faith, keep going. And when I was down on the ground and I didn't want to do it anymore, you can't do this. It's working. You need to keep going. Just trust the process. It's not up to you. It's up to God or the universe or the source. However you want to call it. And my thought was always, it has worked in the past. It will work now. Keep going.
I love that. It's worked like that mantra. It's worked in the past. It will work now. Very powerful, you know, and we know that the power of words spoken and spoken internally as well is affecting our physiology. it is affecting our cells, and that's so powerful. And I certainly didn't have anything quite as horrific as bringing a child in under those circumstances. But my eldest daughter, from a young age, she climbed up on her drum stool. And if you know the stool they sit on, they're pretty flimsy, to sort out a poster, and she came crashing down. And she smashed up her radial head. The whole elbow basically was just a disaster of splinters. And the doctor said he'd never seen anything so bad. And he was saying to me, you need to be prepared. I'll go in and do surgery. But, 99 point something or other, she will not have use of her arm. And I did something similar. I'm like, you know what? You need to give me permission to come in. I know I can't stay through the operation, but I need to be able to gown up and talk to her while she's going under. And they actually gave me permission. And they could hear what I was saying to her because I was down close to her, but they could hear what I was saying. And I was telling how her body was going to receive the anesthetic, how fast the body and the elbow will heal, that she will have use of her elbow. And it went on and on and on. And at one point I looked up, and the nurses and everyone are just looking at me going, wow, if every parent or someone significant could come in, that's just amazing. Because it was like a quiet chant to her until I had to leave the room. And, she doesn't have 100% use, but she's got use of her elbow. But it's that same concept of, no, I'm not going to have her go in believing that she's going to come out and it was her right arm, her predominant arm, that she's not going to be able to use it. Do you know what I mean? So,
and you just mentioned the word belief. And belief is something that you do have very, very deeply. And you can create your own belief. You choose what you want to believe. So what you just said was that mantra that I said, right? But I actually use a different mantra since I am doing this. And it is the sentence, I get everything I want.
Yeah.
And I'm good.
Yeah.
And when you write this down, it's even more powerful. And it's just like that. You need to believe it. I honestly know that whatever you believe in, you can get, you can create, because you will attract it. The universe will align all the circumstances in a way that you get whatever it is that you believe in. And I have seen it so many times.
Do you see the blessing? Do you feel that there's a blessing in such an adverse situation because of the strength of knowing? Because I'm very aligned with what you were saying. And, in the beginning, back in my 20s, when I was retraining my mind, it's like I didn't initially believe in it, but I knew over time. Then it became a belief. And then the belief deepened into an absolute knowing where no one else needs to believe in it. I don't need to, convince anybody of it. It's just a full-bodied whole being knowing. But it's out of adverse situations at times when all of this is applied that it makes you internally at your core soulfully stronger.
And here's also a thing. You don't need to convince anybody but you. You need to be able to train your mind in a way that you convince yourself that this is your truth. And then you will operate from a place of knowing. It's a completely different energy. You're vibrating on a completely different level.
Yes. Yeah. So do you love to work with the women that go through something adverse like this? Yes. Has that been your driver, Miriam?
I work with two different sections of women. Either they want to have more money. It's just about being more successful, which it's nothing bad, right? It's an inner drive we have. It's natural. Yeah. But I have a lot of clients that they hear my story and they come to me with health issues. So I have cancer patients. I have moms with autistic children. And it's incredible what mindset does.
Yeah.
Like, I remember a lady with cancer, and she came to me and she was barely able to walk anymore. She walked her dogs for, I believe, 1.5 hours before she was diagnosed with cancer, and then she was not able to walk. And only through mindset works, only through those little, let's say, tricks that I used for my daughter.
Yeah.
Her blood work results came back. I'm not sure how long she was working with me, maybe 6 weeks, 8 weeks. It was not very long. And then her blood work came back and the results had gotten so much better. And at the time that we were almost finished with the mentoring,
Yes.
for about 6 months, by the time we were almost finished, she was able to walk her dog again for 45 minutes.
Yeah.
And the doctor was asking her what she was doing, because it's so incredible how this is even possible.
Love it. Love it. If you could have one key message to let land to finish for our listeners, what would that be?
I would tell them to become aware of what they're thinking, because whatever you are telling yourself, this is what your experience is going to be.
Yeah. Simple yet so profound, isn't it? And that, I think one of the great messages through this too has been the consistency of it, and that you can have that humanness of a breakdown and a cry and, I can't keep going moment, but let it be a moment. Don't let it take over. Hey, thank you so much for sharing your story. It's really powerful stories like this of, how someone sort of awakens, that challenges don't have to confine and define us, that we can't control what's happening externally as such, but we can make choices for how we respond to it. Such a powerhouse of a woman, and you're only going to go from strength to strength to strength and keep uncovering more. And I really appreciate you, because we've got like 13-hour time difference. So it's my morning here and your late evening. And even getting on with your daughter, laying behind you feeling unwell is just a testament to the woman that you are, the heart that you are, and your ability to show up in life. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Kaye, for having me. It was such a pleasure to be here and share my story and tell all our listeners you can do this too.
Yeah. Beautiful way to finish. Join me on my next episode. And if you love this podcast, please subscribe by clicking on the plus button if you're on Apple, or like and follow on Spotify, rate and review. And please share Inner Voice of Knowing with your friends.